George Bonga was a fur trader of African-American and Ojibwe descent, one of the first African-Americans born in what is now Minnesota. He was the second son of Pierre Bonga and an Ojibwe mother. George was schooled in Montreal, Canada, becoming fluent in French as well as Ojibwe and English. He later became a fur trader and interpreter. He was noted in Minnesota for being, as his brother Stephen claimed, one of the first 2 black children born in the state. Stephen also described them as the first white children born there, as the Ojibwe classified everyone who was non-native as white. In 1837, George Bonga tracked down a suspected murderer, an Ojibwe named Chegawaskung, and brought him back to Fort Snelling. The ensuing criminal trial was reputedly the first in Minnesota, and the Ojibwe man was acquitted. George Bonga was described as standing over 6 feet tall and weighing 200+ pounds. Reports said that he would carry 700 pounds of furs and supplies at once. He served as an interpreter, and was believed to have acted as a guide for Governor Lewis Cass. Well respected in the region, Bonga and his wife opened a lodge on Leech Lake after the fur trade declined. George Bonga died in 1880. Biography. In 1802, George Bonga was born to Pierre Bonga, who was black, and his Ojibwe wife. His father, Pierre, was the son of Jean and Marie Jeanette Bonga, slaves who had been brought to the fort on Mackinac Island by the master, Captain Daniel Robertson, a British officer who commanded it from 1782 to his death in 1787. The couple were freed at his death and legally married. Bonga and his wife opened the first hotel on the island. Pierre Bonga worked as a fur trader with the Anishinaabe near Duluth, Minnesota. His first son, Stephen Bonga, born 1799, also became a notable fur trader and translator in the region. The sons had a sister, Marguerite, born in 1797–98. As Pierre Bonga was a relatively successful trader, he sent George to Montreal for school. When the youth returned to the Great Lakes region, he spoke fluent English, French, as well as Ojibwe. Frontier career. Bonga followed in his father's footsteps and became a fur trader with the American Fur Company. In this role, Bonga drew the attention of Lewis Cass, who hired him as a guide and as a translator for the government's negotiations with the Anishinaabe. Bonga's signature is on treaties in 1820 and 1867. Bonga had gained an education among both European and Ojibwe societies, and frequently crossed their borders. Comfortable in white and Anishinaabe society, Bonga identified with both. Reportedly, Bonga called himself one of the first 2 white men in northern Minnesota. He was speaking of his participation in white culture. He criticized white men who treated Anishinaabe trappers unfairly. Bonga wrote letters on behalf of the Anishinaabe, complaining to the state government about individual Indian agents in the region. His letters, which point out both his connections to the white government and the Anishinaabe, illustrate the ways that Bonga traversed cultural boundaries. In 1837, an Anishinaabe man, Chegawaskung, was accused of murdering Alfred Aitken at Cass Lake, then known as Red Cedar Lake. Aitken was the son of the fur trader William Alexander Aitken. Chegawaskung escaped from custody. Bonga trailed the man over 5 days and 6 nights during the winter, eventually catching him. He brought the suspect back to Fort Snelling for trial. In one of the first United States criminal proceedings in the Minnesota Territory, Chegawaskung was tried and acquitted. Chegawaskung was acquitted because Alfred Aitken was half Ojibwe and therefore the court decided it had no jurisdiction over the case. Bonga was unpopular with some Anishinaabe because of his role in the case, but he continued living with and near the people for the rest of his life. In 1842, he married Ashwin, an Anishinaabe woman. They had 4 children together. 1842 marked the effective end of the American Fur Company, with the beaver nearly extinct and European fashions changing. The fur trade that had been Bonga's livelihood had declined dramatically. In its place, Bonga and his wife turned to lodge keeping. For many years, they welcomed travelers into a lodge on Leech Lake. Some travelers reported on Bonga's telling stories of early Minnesota and singing for their enjoyment. Bonga died when he was around 70 years old. Legacy and honors. Bonga Township in Cass County is named after his family. Spelling varied widely at this time. Playwright Carlisle Brown created a play based on Bonga's life titled George Bonga, Black Voyager, which opened in February 2016 at History Theatre in St. Paul, Minnesota, with James A. Williams starring as Bonga.